Cool. Well, kia ora na tātou katoa toa I te ngoa Mesia, o Yesu Mesia, kororia I te rangi teitei. Kia ora na family, welcome again to the Fresh Truth podcast. This is season 3 of our Fresh Truth podcast. Praise the Lord, we haven't been cancelled or deplatformed yet, so that's something to praise the Lord for. Just want to quickly say what's up to Kanan. Malua, Kanan, how are you, bro? Okay, he's whispering because he's been very busy. But for those who are first-time listeners or who don't know too much about Fresh Truth, just want to quickly remind you, Fresh talks about our Pacific or Polynesian background, and Truth talks about our passion for biblical truth and God's Word. We're a group of Bible-believing Christians from Polynesian backgrounds, but we live in the capital of the universe, which is in South Auckland, New Zealand. And we're passionate about God's sufficient and infallible Word, passionate about the saving gospel of Jesus Christ, and passionate about contending for the faith. I just want to quickly turn to our very special guest today, and he's got a long list of achievements and that kind of stuff. So it's sort of it might take the whole podcast to say everything, but his name is Dr. Pouono. Terry graduated from Malua Theological College in Samoa and is currently a lecturer in theology at Laidlaw College, which is here in New Zealand. And Terry has a PhD in theology from the University of Auckland. Did I get that right?
Yeah.
Oh, praise the Lord. So, Terry, welcome. How are you, bro?
Yeah, good, thank you.
Oh, great to have you on the show and to hear from you. And we're going to come back to you very soon, Terry, but I just want to quickly read from God's Word today, if that's all right. And I've been reading through 1st and 2nd Peter over summer. And I just want to read from 1 Peter chapter 3. I'm going to turn to chapter 3. 1 Peter chapter 3, and I'm just going to read a couple of verses that have always encouraged me. So this is 1 Peter chapter 3, verses 13 onwards. And who is he who will harm you if you become followers of what is good? But even if you should suffer for righteousness' sake, you are blessed. And do not be afraid of their threats, nor be troubled. Verse 15, but sanctify the Lord in your hearts, and always be ready to give a defense to everyone who asks you a reason for the hope that is in you with meekness, or some translations say gentleness, with meekness or gentleness and fear. And that's from 1 Peter 3. I love how Peter here points to the persecution that comes to all true followers of Jesus Christ. And that is an ugly reality of what's happening for the body of Christ around the world. But Peter also pushes and encourages believers to defend the faith, to give reasonable answers for the hope that we have in Christ, despite the persecution and despite the cost. And so we always want to check in with God's Word when we get back to Fresh Truth. So now I need to get back to the special guest. Terry, could you introduce yourself? I've given you the sort of formal introduction, but could you introduce yourself? And are you married? Do you have kids? Where do you live? And so on.
Thank you, Ronchi, for the opportunity. If you don't mind me saying some formalities, one, whatalo whātui lau sunga, Ronchi, Tanyelu, whape fo I lau sunga, Kanan, whape fo I lau mai moa, malole soifua manuia, malangi ma.
Nice.
Tai tono iwi lava ina le angatonine se whamatalanga ona oa o si atali o te tali tonu whaingo whia lava mea ona o le atua malantala rei.
Moni.
So I'm Terry Pouono. Pouono is my grandfather's name. His name was Pouono Su'e.
Okay.
He also came through Malua, taught at Malua for a few years and ended up in a village called Lalovi. Okay. Very small village as a pastor. And my father's from Siumu and Matau to Whalatai. My mother is from Sa'anapu and Malie. And they migrated to New Zealand in the early 1970s.
Okay.
I was born and raised here, out in Massey in West Auckland.
West Auckland, okay. Yeah. We'll let you in this time, okay.
But I now live in Manuera.
Oh, so yeah. See, they all come in the end.
I've been converted.
Converted.
In another way.
We've won them home. Yeah.
So I live with Helen and our 4 kids in Clinton Park. They're actually in Napier at the moment, having a short holiday. But really enjoy. We've grew up in the whakasa, both of us. But recently we've left and we're currently fellowshipping in St. John's Presbyterian in Papatoi.
That's the true church as well. I grew up Presbyterians, that's why I call it the true church. Yeah.
We left for we thought that we wanted to get involved in mission work and helping out a lot of the mission agencies like the Cancer Society, some homeless programs, but we felt like our resources were being consumed by being part of their whakasa. So we didn't leave on a bad note.
Okay.
We still love the hymns, we love the people, and we still worship at home using the Samoan language. So, we're navigating through liminal spaces and our journey of faith, but we're still praising God through our service.
Cool. And Terry, some of those things, that's been our discussion as we've tried to work out some of the key questions, because we've sort of titled this podcast From Malua to Laidlaw, right? Two big theological colleges here in the Pasifika region. And one of the things that we at Fresh Truth felt was that, how do we learn from Terry's journey from Malua to Laidlaw, and what insights can we gain from all of that experience, which we want to touch on in the podcast, and sort of learn about some of the key issues that are facing Christians and the church in New Zealand today, but maybe even if we drill into the Pasifika church as well. Terry, I first met you at uni, and we came out of the same university fellowship, but you never talked to me because I thought you thought I was unsaved. Okay. I think you thought I was still a heathen and a pagan.
I think when I'm in the midst of a lawyer, I feel like,
that you're worried?
Very,
Maybe
very
that's
anxious.
the conviction of the Holy Spirit that's there. But so you were a few years before me at university, but we both came out of Pacific Students for Christ. And I just wanted to quickly ask, what was that experience like for you in terms of Ifakasa boy, traditional church, very traditional church, and then coming to hear all this stuff about being born again and spirit-filled and all this kind of stuff. How did you come to faith in Jesus Christ? And especially around that time when I first met you, and I thought, man, you were an older brother in the Lord, quiet, humble, very, very different from me, but also just walking your journey with the Lord. So how did you come to faith in Christ?
When you say how do we come to faith, I think maybe I like to reword that. I think I still seeking Christ,
okay.
And I think faith is a journey.
Agreed.
I don't think it's like something that you reach, but I think it's a journey where you're continually navigating through life, continually seeking God's promises in your life. So I know where you're trying to come from, but I do feel like that was an important stage of my life.
The university time, yeah.
When you leave high school, you go to university, and you're in this space where we see a lot of bad things happen at university, things that are quite liberal and beyond, or radical beyond our own comfort zones as Pacific Islanders. But I was always yearning to know more about the Bible and more about the Word of God, and I found that the Pacific Students for Christ was a very encouraging space. We were one family. You had yourself, Professor Collins, Janita, very encouraging people, and I found that space to be very encouraging in a sense, and it gave me that sense that, hey, this is these guys really are serious about their faith, and some things that some of the biblical teachings that we were yearning for in the Whakasa church, as a young adult growing up, we would find that in the Pacific Students for Christ. So it was challenging as well, because it was kind of like stepping out of our comfort zone. Yep. We talk about born again. It's a theological perspective that you would
in different language as well that was coming through.
And when we talk about whānau whawina or whawina in the Samoan church, you won't say it in the same way as they would do in the Pentecostal church. So, but I was able to navigate my way through that, and I would say, hey, this is going to be tough for me. But that probably wasn't the most radical experience. It was probably going down to Wellington to visit my cousins in Pararoa, who were praise and worship leaders in an open outreach praises ministry in Pararoa. And that was a lot more radical, and loud music, and my family was all from the AUG church, and I found that quite a very challenging experience. But my dad went down. He's a very conservative whakasa, but he said, no, let's go to the AUG church, and he would sit during the service, and and still praise God in his own
Wow.
way. And I found that, man, I saw a lot of maturity in my dad. I'd say I could learn a bit from my dad. And as time went by, you start to think, hey, this is, I think it was tough for me, but at the same time, very significant.
Those experiences
Those
along
experiences,
the way.
yeah, very, very significant. And then that led me on to probably why I went to Malua, to be honest.
Which is a really good set, because the next set of questions is about that journey that I
Yeah.
really wanted to push in. Because, look, I grew up surrounded by whaiwheaus in my family, and I've got cousins and uncles that have come through Malua. And so, to be honest, also, I've had a really bad view of whaiwheaus over the years,
Yeah.
regardless of whatever traditional church. And so... to have one here that's been through that experience is a real honour for us, because then that we get a chance to try and ask you some of these deep questions and really try and push through. So I wanted to ask you firstly, can you tell us about your time at Malua? I mean, what's it like? What things that about God and the Bible and theology did you learn at Malua? Is it just the theological school? Are you doing a bunch of other stuff there? Are you in the mangas as well? Yeah, what's happening in that school?
Always.
That don't know, and for those that don't know, Malua is a theological college in Samoa. It's for the Congregational Christian Church of Samoa, also known as Ifakasa. So, yeah,
So
what was it like?
I was probably, if I could reflect in hindsight on my experiences, Malua was probably the biggest turning point in my life. Those 4 years as a student and my 6 years as a lecturer. Before I go on to Malua, let me go back to Pacific Students for Christ.
Okay, sure.
One of the sisters, when I did share that I was going to Malua, I woke up in the middle of the night and it was, I don't know, maybe it was a lot of the Saul experience. And just in the middle of the night, I was just looking at the roof and I just felt like God was talking to me. And I closed my eyes, I prayed, and I went, and a couple of hours later, I went and told my dad, I want to go to Malua. And my
Wow.
whole family was crying.
Was your dad a whaiwheau as well?
No,
Okay.
Sister Deacon.
Okay.
And I went and told one of the sisters from Pacific Students for Christ, I won't say her name, and she cried and she prayed for me and she said, and she's in the charismatic church, and that really was something that I embraced, and I said, oh man, it's just very encouraging. Went to Malua, and you probably know Malua, very robust in terms of the theological education. I would say that Malua, when I entered Malua in 2000, about 4 or 5 years prior to my entry into Malua, they had made efforts to enhance theological education in terms of new degrees, higher degrees, and making sure that a lot of our scholarship students would come back and teach at Malua. So under the eye of, or the guidance of Professor Otele Perulini, visionary. So theological education, Old Testament, New Testament, theology, church history, practical theology,
So similar
Christian
to other
ethics.
Were you guys doing languages there? Hebrew and Greek?
Greek and
Okay,
Hebrew.
okay.
Yeah, we all learnt Greek and Hebrew. I was probably wasn't too flash in the Hebrew, but I was okay in the Greek.
Well, Kanan is a Greek scholar. I mean, he knows everything. Yeah, Kanan, do you want to? Okay, we'll pause
come
on that.
back.
Yeah.
So in terms of theological education, very tough. 4 years. Probably the only school in the world where you did 3 exams or 6 exams in 3 days.
Oh, snap.
Yeah, one after the other. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday.
And that's every year?
Yep.
Okay.
And straight after you go to the Manga and you still do work. You still go and do a saka for your teacher. So very tough. Christian formation as well is very important. We had morning devotions every day. We had a lot of worship services as a community. 2 on Sunday. We had one on Thursday.
Were you married? Sorry, Terry. Were you married when you went into Malua, or did you get married during Malua?
I was single. I got married as a lecturer.
Oh, okay.
Later
Cool,
on.
yeah.
So I left after my 4 years. I was single.
Okay.
Got married and as a lecturer. So, but I think it was probably I mentioned earlier, it was the biggest turning point in my life because I matured fast. And I learned a lot about our church. I learned a lot about theology, not only as a in theory, but in practice. And I remember queuing up on the day of graduation. Our class were waiting for the bell to go. This is probably 50 meters away from the church. And there was a massive silence, and all of a sudden we all broke down crying
Wow.
because we had come through 4 years of struggle, but it was very rewarding. Probably you know me back at uni, you're hardworking, Ronji, I have to say. I was probably a bit of an immature, young, naive adult at University of Auckland. So I got my degree, but I didn't really feel like that I earned it. At Malua, that really changed my life. I really felt like, even coming home for holidays, my mum would be surprised. Wake up in the morning, I've already weeded the garden.
Oh.
I've already mowed the lawn. And I said,
But
what
those
else?
are the habits that you were
Those are
picking up
habits.
in
And
Malua.
I'm thinking of, maybe in church history, the Benedictine monasteries in Rome. And they had this philosophy called ora et labora in Latin, which is pray and work. So the philosophy behind ora et labora is that laziness is hostile to the soul. And that means if you've got a lazy mind, lazy body, you're a lazy Christian.
Yeah, I mean, I was reading about that in Proverbs as well. It talks about laziness, and you look at the ant and you see the work of the ant, and you sort of those lessons. So so there's all that work going on, the maumanga stuff, the suckers, the chores, but you got to keep up your theological studies at the same time.
Exactly. I think it's a discipleship in a different way, because it's about, you learn about discipline, you learn about being relational in a community, you learn about if someone does a step up, you need to, you step in for that person. And that's what I learnt in Malua. We would have, on Saturday mornings, probably the toughest day we had at the Maumanga, we went to Vele de Val, and we were there from probably 6:30 to 1 o'clock in the afternoon. The hardest. But all I remember is that when I started to struggle and I was starting to faint, my fellow colleague next to me, like he's the principal right now at the Malua Theological College, Vaitusi, would come around and goes, "Come on, Usufa Malusi." And he would weed my spot. And these are it's all about relationships and encouraging one another. And a lot of the lessons we learn in Malua, we are required to take that into the ministry.
Again, that's a good connection then too. So you had all this theological training, church history, formation, languages, all that kind of stuff. So did you go and become an Efakasa minister straight away, or what was that journey after you graduated like that?
No, I got called to be a teacher.
Well, so you stayed on campus?
No, we went on a church scholarship. So after your 4 years, there will be some delegates from the graduate class would be selected to go on scholarship. And the vision of the church is that they will go outside, do a master's, do a PhD, and then they will come back and teach at the college.
Okay.
So I was very fortunate and blessed and humbled to be able to receive a scholarship to Geneva.
Okay.
With a fellow colleague of mine. He's actually the minister at Zanapu now, Danny Epati. We went to Geneva.
You weren't there with John Calvin, like writing the John Calvin stuff at that time in Geneva, were you? Like,
John, no, well, we went to the University of Geneva for a couple of our courses. So we saw the Reformation Wall.
Oh,
we had classes that did it. We saw the Reformation Wall. Learned a lot about Calvinism. World Council of Churches.
Okay.
I think that was another experience, is that it really opened my mind to the global church, stepping out of my comfort zone. When you go to Geneva, you're there with Africans, Americans, Europeans, Jamaicans, Lutheran Church, Presbyterian, Pentecostal.
Yeah.
So I remember my experiences in our first week. We had the African brothers led worship, and they were dancing on the pulpit. And
that's very
on the
different
bongo
from your
drums.
background.
Well, I was all right, because I was like, this is cool. But the Orthodox brothers in my...
What, the Greek or Russian? Greek and Russian?
Greek and Serbia, they found that was quite... This is blasphemy. this is not right. This is God's temple. This is our sacred space. How can you dance on the pulpit? So the challenges that we face in ecumenical college...
Can I ask a question about that, please? Because, look, I know a little bit about ecumenicalism, and I get warning lights. I get warning signs when I hear about ecumenicalism, because I think, well, where does doctrine sit in that? I can understand connecting as different churches,
right?
But we're talking about different views of soteriology or Christology or eschatology, whatever those things are. And so, could you explain to those that don't know what ecumenicalism is? And then I've got another question after this. So if you could just explain,
So
please.
in
Also,
simple terms, the ecumenical movement is the coming together of churches in unity, but also acknowledging diversity.
okay.
And it was a movement that started way in the early 20th
Yeah,
century.
yeah, and I know the Lausanne Congress has been really doing that.
And you got
over the
different
years.
movements
Yeah,
like
yeah,
the
yeah.
Faith and Order, which looks at theological difference. You got Life and Works, which looks at our practices and you got the mission movement as well, which the three strands of the ecumenical movement. What they had was they try and make sure there's some kind of equity within that space. So where all voices are represented, whether you're regardless of where you came from
So it could
in
be
the world.
a Presbyterian, a Methodist, a Greek Orthodox, and they're coming together to discuss an issue, or
Okay. Yep. So we had a lot of discussions. So you can't completely find unity in that space.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering.
That's what we were seeking. And tolerance was really important. So when I mentioned that worship at the start of my journey, at the end of the first year, my Greek brothers, it's a matter of coming together and understanding one another.
Yeah.
And even our teachings, even in our class discussions, we'll say, oh, can we have a perspective from our African brothers? What do you think about this issue or the politics? And so the opportunity to voice our opinions from our social location was really important. Our lecturers came from different parts of the world, from different denominations. And so you can sense there we were aiming to find some kind of unity. And then what you do is we go back to we go back to New Zealand, Samoa, and we share those stories. Because my African brother from Libya, this is what he would from his perspective. It's understanding their story. His one was a really challenging one. Libya being a very unstable,
very
political,
dangerous country.
Pentecostal. My sister from South America was Pentecostal. My brother from Guatemala was a Roman Catholic priest. He used to be. So just hearing their stories, it was such an amazing experience. And I came back to Malua thinking, wow, this is so small. Malua, New Zealand Christianity is so small compared to the global world. And even in my class, when you talk about Greek, my two Greek brothers, we didn't need to pass any words. We just asked those guys.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So just the theology and wrestling with those theological, you really love the ecumenical movement.
I experienced that a little bit on the mission field. When we were serving in different parts of Africa and Asia, you're seeing the body of Christ. I guess when I look at some of the ecumenical stuff, you're talking about trying to work towards unity, but understanding the diversity. So I definitely understand the beauty of what it means to understand someone's story, hear their story out, and so on. But I guess I keep coming back to, well, how do you wrestle through a different understanding of doctrine or systematic theology? And for us, look, I didn't study theology, and I never want to be honest, but we're passionate about the word. And so we have a high view of doctrine, a high view of scripture. And so I'm just wondering, is there a point where we compromise so much for that kind of unity that we actually lose the truth of the gospel?
Remember, this is 2,000 years of Christian history, and basically, even in Malua, I have to confess, ours is very predominantly a Western theology.
Sure.
And I met Orthodox theologians in Geneva, and their theology is so deep. So when you say we're seeking biblical truth, there are so many interpretations out there.
Yeah, I can understand. Yeah.
And I think there was a lot of tolerance because there was an opportunity for us to say, hey, this is Orthodox theology. This is our view of this is how we do worship, and this is why we do worship. This is 2,000 years. Roman Catholics would say this is why we have the Rosary, and they've been around for years. So understanding that their tradition is really important as well, and it's really hard to get. So when you say biblical truth from their perspective, for example, we celebrate, the Orthodox Christians would celebrate Christmas on a different time. Because we follow a different calendar. Yeah. You guys follow the Gregorian calendar. Yeah. And this is what we believe in. And they also believe they are closer to the original church. Sure. Based on their practices and their modes of worship. So trying to, what would I say, kind of like turn a blind eye on what they're sharing. I think it's like turning a blind eye on 2,000 years of history. Yeah.
And I get that. I'm not saying to turn a blind eye, but I'm guessing how do you navigate? And I'm not
Yeah.
in that space.
It's
and
all
I'm
about
not
navigating.
and I'm not a whaiwhiao, I'm not a theologian, but how do you navigate that space where, I believe at Fresh Truth, we're really encouraging people to know what they believe in and why they believe it. And for us, coming back to the Word as our final authority, church history helps, all of that kind of stuff really contributes, but we want to encourage people to know what they believe in. But then navigating through all of that stuff is hard.
It's hard. It's
a difficult story.
Believe it or not, we all share one thing in common, that God is the creator of heaven and earth.
Yeah, beautiful.
And Jesus Christ is the ultimate revelation of God and his promises for humanity. We all share that common, and so that was
common grounds.
There was a lot of opportunities for us to find these common grounds, and that's been done well, because the ecumenical movement started in the early 1900s. So they've done a lot of work. The Orthodox, Presbyterian, Lutheran all came together. Goes, hey, these are the common grounds. These are the differences, but these are the common grounds that, it was awesome.
Yeah, sounds like
what an experience. I know there are challenges, as you mentioned, but
just being around those people would be trippy. Like I've seen it. I've seen the body of Christ, different shades, colors, expressions, theologies, and it's a privilege to be overseas. New Zealand's in a bubble, eh?
Yeah.
Pacifica's in a bubble. We're in this bubble, but when we get out of it and we see the body of Christ functioning in these different contexts, as you said earlier on.
For a year, being immersed together as a community with 40 other students from other parts of the world, it's a wonderful experience. I think you need to really immerse yourself into that community.
Okay. Terry, I didn't read all of your PhD thesis, but I went back and had a bit of a look at your thesis, and one of the things that you mentioned there in one of your key questions was. And trying to remind you of that key question again, in case you forgot it, bro, because it's a pretty deep piece of writing. But you said, should the Congregational Christian Church of Samoa, or the Lamosa or Efakasa, but should the church in New Zealand, the CCCS Church in New Zealand, adopt a new perspective in order to be an authentic Christian witness in the global world? I thought it was a fascinating question, because I come from a Efakasa. I grew up Presbyterian, but I've got a big Efakasa background, going back generations. And so when I thought about this question, I thought, well, what's the new perspective that you were arguing for? And has it happened in that time that you've been in that world, but maybe since left that world as well, because you've left the whakasa. So what's that new perspective that you're really trying to fight for?
So I was basically writing from the social location of a New Zealand born Samoan, being raised in the church, and the many challenges that we faced. I really found it challenging trying to find the deeper nuances of scripture. And I found that they failed in many ways in basically teaching us the deeper meaning of Scripture. Until I went to Malua, I found, this is what we're missing in the church.
Okay.
But it was from the perspective of a New Zealand-born Samoan who was caught between two social cultural worlds. But when I mention globalization, it's more than two social cultural worlds. It's not just a Samoan and a Western. It's not just a home and church and the school, sports environment. The multifaceted world is talking about media culture, globalization.
Yeah.
These images we find.
You used the Coke can imagery in your thesis.
It's Coca-Cola, water.
Yeah.
So my thesis title was coconut water in a Coca-Cola bottle. So I'm a young Samoan man being raised in the Samoan church, who preserves a fixed identity. Because it's a transplanted Christianity.
Sure.
The village Christianity has been transplanted on foreign soil
to the New Zealand context.
And the purpose is to find a space of familiarity. When you go out to work, you're going to be mixing with other people, see things that are beyond your Samoan customs and cultural worldview. But the church space is our comfort zone, and also preserving our way of worship and the way we do things in Samoan Christianity.
So can I jump a section of question here? Because like I enjoyed some of the stuff that I was reading through your thesis, and so it might take me a long time to get through it, but I wanted to go back and have a look at that stuff. And I saw some of the presentations that you did around a Samoan Christian worldview, and so we do a lot of stuff around worldview here at Fresh Truth. We're always trying to work out what defines our worldview. Can I ask this, and this might be a hard question, bro, but we ask this question a lot at Fresh Truth: culture versus Christ. There's a huge rise in a focus in anganu'u and cultural practices. You've talked about a transposed Christianity that's come from our island context here, put in New Zealand suburbs, from the village to the suburbs, and so there continues to be that huge emphasis on anganu'u, cultural traditions, and those things, especially in our traditional churches. We're talking probably more about the Efakasas, the Mekos, some of those Tongan churches, the Catholic, they real strong anganu'u stuff, strong culture and tradition. And some of that has value, I'll be honest, some of that has real value. My question is, do you support this? And is it biblical to have so much focus on this stuff? And then where's the focus on God's word? Where's the focus on teaching a good systematic theology that helps the parishioners be able to navigate this world? Like, what's your views on that space?
I wouldn't say it would come under the systematic theology discipline. I think you're more of a contextual theology.
But I guess what I'm asking is, where's the teaching of theology or good doctrine to the parishioners when there's so much anganu'u focus? Does that make sense, bro? Yeah.
So I wouldn't bring doctrine into the picture. I think let's just read it, because culture is one of those words which has many nuances and many meanings. You could probably, there's culture in biology, there's culture in anthropology and sociology.
There's a skateboard culture, there's a basketball culture. Hey, it's broad.
Media
it's
culture,
broad.
pop culture, music culture. But we'll just use a simple definition. It's a place where cultures and belief systems are and practices are carried out.
And organised.
And in a community, in an organised community, passed down from generation to generation. Sure. I think this is my view. I was immersed in the whakasa church, came through Malua, put a lot of reflection into it. I don't think, what I find is that let us put ourselves in this position that imagine that we had this machine that cleared all our memories. This one, imagine Canaan. We came in here and Canaan said, "Hey, there's a machine here. It can wash away all your memories. You come out and you'll forget everything." Imagine we go into that machine. We came out and we lost. We don't know. Have no memory of life.
Started at zero.
Yeah. And we came out and Canaan said, "You know what? Culture is a blessing from God.
Mm-hmm.
You know, embrace that." We'll definitely have a different perspective of life.
Sure.
Because I think we come to, we came from university and was always talking about culture in a negative sense. But I went to Malua and I saw a lot of value, as you mentioned.
Yeah, that's right.
And sometimes I wonder whether it's not the culture that's the issue. I think in Jesus' time, he came through, this is the Son of God incarnated into a culture, the Jewish culture. And I know that Jesus would have followed a lot of the Jewish customs,
sure,
like any other Jewish boy growing up.
He went to the temple,
he
did all of that stuff.
He read the scripture, the Hebrew scripture.
He went to the synagogue.
Exactly. And not once did Jesus didn't say much about his culture. I think it was more critical of the interpretation of culture by Pharisees, by the Jewish leaders.
And also the ring of laws that they had put around it.
And so using that kind of philosophy, I'm wondering whether culture is not the issue, but how we use culture in the postmodern world. Okay. So I see what I'm saying is I've left the whakasa church and I go to the Presbyterian church, and when they say, "Terry, are you guys all right to do morning tea?" I was, "Oh yeah, we'd love to. This is what we do back in our church. My mum and dad would serve." You know, service is really important. Tautua. So in Tongan culture, they talk about whatogia.
Yep.
And what we did is we did morning tea. We bought pizza. The whole table was full of food. And the 50-year-old came up to me and goes, "Terry, it's only a morning tea. It's not a lunch."
So you went hundies on
it. Yeah, I said, you know what I said to him? I said, "This is my culture.
Sure.
This is what my mum and dad taught me. This is, for me, our service to God, service to the church, and this is." I think it's sacrifice. Sacrifice is really big, and So there are really good aspects of culture.
I agree.
It's how we interpret culture in the postmodern world. And I'm thinking of, I just wrote an article yesterday, I submitted it this morning, called, the Moana, the Where You Are animation, that song where everyone's dancing, and you got women weaving baskets, you got men fishing, men climbing coconut trees, everyone's so happy. I think that's kind of like the ideal, let's just use the word telos, of the Samoan culture, social cohesion and harmony. I call it in Tokelao, in Tuvalu, they call it Tokelao, they call it inati. You're distributing food for the welfare and the social welfare of the community.
Sure.
For those who don't have the fish, give it out to them. So that's a really massive, that's a blessing.
Yep.
That's for me Christian. That's for me aligns with God's attributes of justice and equity and equality. And I think the problem is how we, when we transplant something like that, and we use the same signs and symbols and semiotics, we use the same idea of giving and reciprocal giving, but the symbols have changed. So the symbols have changed from a basket of coconut.
Sure.
Back in my grandfather's day, I would imagine when they gave the whātua, when they gave something to the fifth elder, they say, "Oh, le atatalo, this is a basket of taro."
And parts of the world
this is
still
coconuts.
do that. Parts of the church in around in Africa, I saw that they gave their vegetables. They gave it wasn't around Western money. Yeah. They gave what they could.
I mean, they got the Ubuntu kind of like philosophy. That's amazing. I think there's probably more Christian than what we do outside. What I'm trying to say is when we appropriate that and reinterpret that in the postmodern world, and the signs have changed. So instead of boxes of taro and coconut and fish for the whewhiau and for the families, it's been translated. I think Robert Streiter, a Roman Catholic, called it retranslated. Retraditionalization. So the traditions are still the same, but the signs have changed, or the symbols.
Or the way they've done it.
The way we've done it. So we're still giving, there's a lot of reciprocal giving, but it's been commercialized. It's changed to money. It's changed to pusapisupo. And that puts a lot more pressure. So the telos back in the Moana setting, it's all about social cohesion and the harmony. When we put it in the postmodern world, when we do the same actions and practices, but the signs have changed, then my question is, where is the harmony and the social cohesion that was there in the Moana setting? People are struggling a lot more because there's a lot more haves and haves nots now. So culture in the traditional world, back in the 1950s, Samoan culture back in Samoa, it's amazing.
But can I say though also, but then that's the assumption that the culture in the 1950s or before that was utopian or was ideal. Like I know and we know that there was still major failings in the culture back then.
But
I understand that there's a goal around social cohesion. I guess. And I like the way that you talked about that the symbols and the way that we've done it has changed. I guess we get a lot of people contact Fresh Truth and asking us, they're from traditional churches.
Right.
And they're struggling around the things that have changed. You know what I mean?
It's the retraditionalization.
That's right. They're
that's
struggling
what I mean.
with all of that. But at the same time, we're getting people contact us who are hungry for God's word, hungry for teaching, or I mentioned theology or systematic theology or good doctrine, but they're not finding it in their traditional churches, and so they run to other churches to try and find it. And so I guess that's where that Christ and culture discussion has been really important for us, because it's a major thing for the church in New Zealand and the Pacifica right now, because we're really just spread in Australia, the US, and New Zealand. Hey, that's really where our people are, and obviously our islands. And so how has that functioned around the teaching of God's word, but all the other cultural practices?
Well, we look at the history. I think, this might be a very biased selective historical account, but when the missionaries came over, they planted the gospel, and they actually worked with the people and developed an indigenized gospel that they thought was authentic to them. So I've used authentic. So I would imagine there's a thing called the LMS fundamental principle. And so the understanding is the LMS made mistakes when they took the gospel to other countries, and they thought, I think we're opposing the gospel on the Africans. And they said, hey, we got to have this principle. So we go out to the Pacific, we plant the gospel, but we make sure we translate the gospel into their language, and we make sure that they are happy. But we're going to filter out stuff that you think are not right. So it was a gradual development of
But that's a
the
missional
gospel.
process
Yep,
about
yep.
the bringing of the gospel and missionizing
Yep,
countries.
yep. Into their language,
Yeah, yeah.
and so there were things like whaalualo
Yeah.
and alofa, and the missionaries say, hey, these are wonderful aspects of the Samoan culture. I think these really align with the Christian gospel. We can elevate it to another level.
Yeah, yeah.
Because Christ is all about love.
Yeah, it reminds me of this
and you
book.
put God at the center.
Yeah, it reminds me of this book, Eternity in Their Hearts. I don't know if you've ever read it, but it talks about how the gospel and God's narrative or story is told through different cultures around the world, and it looks at these different examples. I think of something like the ifonga ceremony in Samoa. That if you don't know about that ceremony, it's about forgiveness. Like, I think it's such a beautiful picture of forgiveness that, for me, I often think about Christ's redemption for our sins on the cross as the ultimate ifonga. He was innocent, but he took the place, the guilty person's place, which is what the gospel is. So, I wanted to ask that question, because the other thing, look, people are gonna, I might get hate mail for this theory, but,
all good.
But one thing that I know people are struggling, and I've struggled with it coming from a family of whaiwhiaus, is this elevation of the whaiwhiau. The picture that you gave me of the or the students at Malua was beautiful. You guys are in the mo'omanga, you were serving disciplined communities, and then I fast forward and I turn up head tables, and there's so much elevation of the whaiwhiau, and I think I see that in the charismatic church, I see that in the Pentecostal church, and to be honest, I probably see it in every church in the world. And I'm not saying we don't. We have to honor those shepherds that are teaching us God's word, these faithful men that are teaching God's word. But how did you navigate that as a Malua grad who was a lecturer who would travel overseas, and that sort of elevation when literally the whaiwhiau means the one who does the chores, the one who serves.
Literally, whaiwhiau do the work.
That's right, the one that does the work. And yet in our Pacifica cultures, man, I don't see that happening. I'm not saying that the work on the pulpit is not. That's the key work of a whaiwhiau in my view. Yeah. But do you get my question, bro? I know there's people that struggle with this. I struggle with this personally. I'm just wondering. You're a whaiwhiau. I get to ask a whaiwhiau.
Oh, I'm not a whaiwhiau anymore.
You've gone through that. You've gone through Malua. Only a few people have done that. You know what I mean? So you've gone through that whole experience. So what's your view on that, bro? Because it's a curly subject.
Probably give you a safe answer to start off with.
All good, bro. All good, bro.
My safe answer is I know a lot of whaiwhiaus that do a lot of good.
I agree.
My mate Jenny in Sanapu, he actually, when he goes out for his visitations, he actually gives stuff back to the people. He goes with a plastic bag, and it's going to be bisupo, elengi, you're going to be kalu in there. He goes to an invitation and gives stuff back. I don't know if he still does that, but that's his. He's all about love. He's about alofa.
I saw my uncle do that in Greyland. He used to do that as well. So I'm not taking a shot. I'm not taking a shot. I'm just thinking, culturally, we've done this. So sorry.
I won't. I may not be accurate in my facts, but I do know there has been a lot of talk about trying to minimise the burdens on families. Like Yuritana had proposed that when we have guest speakers, we'll just make it simple. I think it's probably not only the whaiwhiaus, it's probably also the people. Yeah, exactly. That's good point, Terry. I think so. There might be issues of pride and shame that come into the equation. If you're a Mataiva family and you don't want to bring shame to your family, those issues that's a big issue. Part. And I do know that there have been attempts to let's just say, make it easier for the people, but it didn't go well with Matais. And that's probably one thing that I want to mention, because I don't want to pinpoint whaiwhiaus, because what I do want to say is I think there needs to be, from my perspective as a theologian, if I still have a love for my church and I still love my background, but I do feel that there needs to be more of an attempt to come together and have these conversations, these robust, open conversations. I don't think we're doing that enough, not only with the cultural issues, but any issue. I know we have the frontele in Malua, but it's going to be all about, they're going to be coming a lot of the logistics about the church. But it's a lot of these robust, real hard issues that I believe that need to be discussed. It's not only the Whakasa church, but all churches.
Yeah.
I think when you look at the global world and how fast it's evolving and moving, I don't think the church generally are coming together, whether it's the Whakasa, but together as a Pacifica community, we're not having these robust discussions. We're kind of like listening to one another, talking about it on the golf course, but we're not doing anything about it. That's the action, the praxis. The reflection in the praxis that I believe is important theology. Karl Barth talk about holding the Bible in one hand and holding the newspaper in one hand. Are we, and then in the need for us to come together and address these issues and that are talked about in the newspaper using critical theological reflection. And that not only involves the faith but it's also the church in general.
And the people in general.
The people in general.
Yeah. And I think one thing I wanted to acknowledge, though, is I think there's a big desire and hunger from people for that.
Yeah.
Because we're looking at our faith elders as leaders, as the people who are teaching us God's word, but we need to navigate this cultural or this contextual dynamic that we're living in New Zealand now. Yeah. What is the church saying around LGBT issues? What is the church saying around trans issues? What is the church saying around all these different issues? But we're not having those conversations, and I think having balanced conversations. I think it's really easy to lean on the progressive side or to lean on the conservative side, but actually come and be robust and actually argue.
Maybe it comes back to that transplanted community.
Yeah,
It's a safe zone.
Maybe it's the 11th commandment that Vodi Bockham says that we're just too nice. Hey, it's the 11th commandment. We're too nice.
You know what it is about the VAR, the Tula. But I do believe, I'm not going to judge any of the faith elders, but I do believe there needs to be more of a collective effort. Yeah. And as leaders of the church, I think they have a big influence in those talks. I mean, they come through 4 years of theological education, and I believe theological education continues. You know, they preparing their sermons, they reading about doctrines and dogmas, creeds. They do their research, but it's a matter of coming together. And I know there are faith elders, it's probably fragmented, there are faith elders who are concerned, but not all the faith elders are concerned. So I'm not pointing the faith. When we talk about elevation of faith elders, that's a cultural issue.
I also throw in there also, it's about, you've got these faith elders that have got all this knowledge, God willing, they've all this theological and biblical knowledge, but people need help to translate that stuff. Because if I'm learning through the book of Romans, well, what does that mean when I apply that in my life as a teacher, in my life as a nurse? You know what I mean? Like I think that's that. I think people, that there's a hunger for we're not teaching God's word effectively. We're not teaching those things. There is
a Malua Bible School. It was an initiative that started in 2009. It was raised by a few of the districts, and it came to the Fontele. We started in 2009. It's a school for the laity. Run by Malua teachers. So that was in Samoa, and just last year they started one here in Auckland.
And that's cool because that opens it up. That opens it up. Yeah. So Terry, sorry, I'm just aware of time because I've been fascinated with this Talanoa. But Terry, so what are you doing now? So we haven't touched too much on Laidlaw. We might not have enough time, but what are you doing now at Laidlaw Bible College?
So I'm teaching theology. I taught a lot of the level 5 papers, beginning theology, biblical theology, a bit of church history as well. This year I'm designated to teach a few of the Pacifica papers. I'm doing Pacifica Theology.
Ooh, that sounds interesting.
Still,
we don't have enough time to dig into that
and,
one.
And the history of Christianity, Pacific Christianity.
Okay.
Yeah, looking at a lot of the... so what they taught in the islands, the spread of Christianity to the Pacific, and also to diaspora, New Zealand, Australia, and America. There's also a course on discipleship run by... Gina Siosi.
Yep, I know Gina
this
well.
semester, and basically the aim of that course is to draw on the wisdom and the experiences of a lot of the people like yourself, Efeso Collins, sports celebrities, Pacific Islanders, who can come in and tell their stories. And this basically weaves into the idea of discipleship.
Okay. So what's one difference that you saw between Malua and Laidlaw, other than the obvious, like the language stuff, and does Laidlaw have a manga that they work in? But what is it? Because I've seen Laidlaw over the years. Can I be really, really honest also?
Yeah.
And I know your principal well, and he's not going to like what I say. But when people ask me, I want to go to theological college, I don't recommend any college in New Zealand. I never have. and I have my own reasons for it. I'm being really honest to you. You're a lecturer there. I know your principal. I know Gina and others that teach there. Like, what's the use of going to a theological college like Laidlaw to, why is it important, biblically or life-wise?
I think personally, you learn more about the Bible in a deeper way, going deeper into Scripture, whether it's Old Testament, New Testament, reading about the story of the Bible, how everything connects. But making those connections, so when I talk about faith, I think my faith journey is a lot more richer now because of my understanding of Scripture, my understanding of Christian theology, my understanding of theological ethics.
Okay.
Basically, it's not a fragmented understanding of God.
Would you advise young believers if they want? This is the selling point, I guess, for Laidlaw.
Yeah,
you'd advise
you ask any. Sorry, I'm going to be biased here, but
if
if you ask any student that comes through Laidlaw and who's done theology, they'll all say 100% come to Laidlaw. You learn not only Laidlaw but even at Kiri Baptist. You just learn a lot at a deeper level. You learn about in history Christian persecutions. You learn about the Arian controversy, Arius against Athanasius. You learn about the Nicene Creed, the Reformation, Martin Luther, John Calvin, Ulrich Zwingli. You learn about evangelical movement. You learn about the rise of Pentecostalism and
so you're getting all these tools
all these tools are really important. I think my faith now, my understanding of theology is a lot more compact, not fragmented like before I went to Malua, but it's a lot more compact and a lot more coherent based on my coming through, learning all these, and I'm still learning, to be honest.
Well, that's a cool thing I've really picked up. One of the cool things I picked up from you also is the ongoing journey. Yeah. It's the journey of learning and working through our theologies, because everyone's got a theology, whether you know it or not. Yeah. You've got a theology, but working out, what informs that theology? So this has been an ongoing journey, even for you who's got a PhD and who lectures in this stuff.
Believe it or not, someone asked me this question, when I graduate, you must know everything about God. You know what I told him?
Then you'd be God.
You know what I told him? I said, I only know this much.
Yeah.
I know this much, because when you learn theology, it really puts everything into perspective, that God is massive, and also all we know is this much. And I said, man, there's a whole world of knowledge out there that I don't know.
So what if a young person comes up, Terry, and says, well, theology is the study of God. So there's a lot of stuff, a lot of good stuff there, but I just want to study the Bible. What if someone comes, I just want to understand the Scriptures. Do we have to learn all this other stuff? I believe it's helpful, like church history and all of those things that you mentioned before. But do we have to learn that other stuff, or is it just about understanding hermeneutics, understanding exegesis, eisegesis, working through the Word?
There's a lot more. Yeah. Theology is massive.
So
when you talk about theology on a broader scale, there are so many disciplines and so many kind of sub-disciplines or subjects within those disciplines that you can learn. So you don't have to. I mean, you can, if you want to, so in your first year, you'd do all the intro papers for all the courses. Your second year, you could specialize. You could be, I want to focus more on the Old Testament. So it narrows down and becomes more specialized. You could say in your second year, it might be just focusing on the Gospels. The third year might be focusing on a couple of the books in the New Testament. So that's how it works. And you start wide and you go narrow down and deeper.
But is it that diverse at Laidlaw or even Malua? Is there a balance of theological views? Like we were just talking about eschatology, the end times before.
Yeah.
Is that kind of difference or diversity represented at different Bible colleges? Or there's some Bible colleges who are more, that's a Calvinist kind of Bible college or a Arminianist kind of Bible college. Or is it better to have a balance?
We are an interdenominational college, but there are kind of like
this is Laidlaw,
more prominent scholars that we find are grounded in certain subjects, and we say we use those readings. Like when you talk about intercultural studies, when you talk about Christ and culture, there's many models according to Reinhard Richard Niebuhr, the Christ and Culture book. You look at Christ and culture, Christ of culture, Christ and culture. There are a lot of ways where Christ and culture can interact. Stephen Bevan's brought up 6 his models of contextual theology, the different ways that gospel and culture can interact. So these are key books. So we don't just find a book from, oh, that's a good book. No, we have a look at some of the more prominent scholars that are recognized in the world of academia between the different colleges. So we all kind of like share similar ideas on who those prominent scholars
Okay.
are. We might have differences, but a lot of us will say, oh, these are the prominent Old Testament scholars. N.T. Wright is probably a well-known N.T. scholar. So a lot of the ideas are directed towards those academic writings. So it's not as diverse. I mean, it's diverse, but we do make sure
You try to stay middle of the
we
road,
do make sure
really,
that this is a 5-star scholar. These are the 5-star scholars. These are the books we want in our bibliography.
Okay.
This is the very grounded theological perspectives that we feel cover a wide range of denominational affiliations and interpretations.
Nice. Hey Terry, I've really enjoyed wrestling through some of the stuff and being cheeky and asking you some questions about faith elves and that kind of stuff, because I always like asking these questions because I think it's good to have that discussion. So also, I honour your responses because I think it's you've shared those things that you believe in and the background and the history and the journey. So I really enjoy that also. I guess if I can wind down to some of these closing questions, if that's all right also. And I think it's this question around contending and defending. And I don't know what your perspective on this, but in that closing briefing that I gave you, I talked about how do you think Christians in Aotearoa should contend and defend the faith? Well, and actually, it'll be interesting to hear your view because we've talked about some really key issues around theology, around culture and Christ, around faith elves and ministers, and that's not just the traditional island church thing that happens across the board. I always want to acknowledge that, but yeah, in this context that we're living in, you have a very special sense of it because you're in Laidlaw and you're working in that coalface. How do you think Christians in Aotearoa should contend for and defend the faith?
I'm going to take something from what we taught in my biblical theology class.
Go for it also.
Sorry, beginning theology. I think there is a need for us to listen to the questions and concerns of the world.
Okay.
And we need a good understanding of Scripture, a good understanding of doctrines and theology. But there's also, I'm coming back to Karl Barth's, that kind of like image of holding the Bible in one hand and holding the newspaper in another hand. I think there's an issue. I think one of the biggest issues in the modern world is that the church is becoming redundant in a sense, or
statistics are showing that already.
De-Christianized.
Yeah.
I think that's the kind of term they use in Britain.
Yeah. Well, some theologians or some commentators saying it's a post-Christian world we're living in. The Christians the church is not relevant anymore.
So it comes back to that question: how do we make Christianity an authentic? How can we become authentic witnesses of the gospel in the postmodern world? You probably know this better than I do, but I believe that we're not only defending the faith, but we're also trying to make the faith relevant.
Yeah, okay.
And I believe, coming back to what I mentioned earlier, that the church, whether it's a local church or the global church, need to come together and address these issues. And I think we can defend the faith. We don't need to defend the faith if we address these issues. I think the issue now is we're becoming less relevant. This is not about defending the faith, it's about how do we make it relevant to the people today. And one of my main concerns in the Presbyterian Church is a lot of the elders from St. John's and St. Andrew's and Manuera are still there. They're in their 60s, 70s. My challenge is, where are their children and where are their grandchildren? So New Zealand is a very secular society, and this is a trend that has started many years ago in Britain. I think people were going to the soccer stadiums on Sundays, they were going to church. They said, I think it's how do we make God's promises and Jesus teachings relevant and meaningful to the people today. And you came through the Salvation Army. I'm not going to give you my answer. I think we need to be more practical, because people will say, they come and teach me about Jesus, but they're very exclusive. So what are you going to do about it? And so if you have a look at some of the religions that are probably growing, they're probably the religions that are actually walking the talk. And I think in the modern world, that's what, because I'm looking at the issues today. and they're actually looking at us for hope. You know, we don't just say, "Oh, Jesus is hope, Jesus is light." They need to see that through our practices and our witness. And that's my own personal understanding.
Yeah.
That's why I got involved in the Cancer Society. That's why I got involved with the homeless programs, because I think if we don't actually put that into practice, then I think we're going to lose a lot of the people today who are very pragmatic in the way they see religion.
Good response.
That's
also.
my view. I think we need to walk the talk. If you actually look at the statistics, the census, and I got this from one of my colleagues a couple of years ago who did a lecture on New Zealand Christianity, the churches that are actually quite stable as to other migrant churches. So the Samoan churches, the Tongan churches, a lot of their numbers are still relatively the same. It's the Barangi churches that are declining. And I think it's because we are still relational. I think we need to bring the relationality back into our so I don't want to by making the faith more authentic or more meaningful and relevant. So I know you're coming from a different angle by defending the faith, but by me, from my perspective, we need to make the faith a bit more real for our people.
Can I ask then, Terry, it made me think, like you're using Karl Barth's picture of the scriptures in the newspaper. Do you think there's a danger that we're too focused on the newspaper, that we get so caught up in the good works and in my view, maybe the social justice-y kind of stuff of the world, which I think is beautiful. Christians have been, I would push back a bit, because I think Christians have been walking the talk for 2,000 years. Like, we've absolutely lived out our faith. You know, we built hospitals, built schools, built societies, and so I guess, is there a danger that we're too caught up in that part? We actually forget the message of Christ.
Yeah, I think that's where this practice model is really important for me. Is this understanding that yes, we have done some great things, but the world today is moving so fast.
I agree.
You know, compared to, we're all moving as like a snail. In the first 2,000 years of history. After the year 2000, things are moving so fast. I think it's really important for us to come together and reflect critically with wisdom and discernment.
Okay.
So we could do a lot of practices, but is it relevant to today's society? Is it relevant to I don't know why I'm saying this to you. That's good, you're in the Salvation Army. But I believe there needs to be relevant practice that comes from, I think it comes back to orthopraxy and orthodoxy. Right practice comes from right thinking.
Yeah.
But that right thinking is not there because we're not having those fruitful discussions or fruitful conversations. So I
often think though that the right practice that we do is wonderful, but without Christ at the center of it, then I think it's just social work.
Yep.
You know what I mean? We're just doing
definitely.
social good, which is, but I'm talking about the church here. I'm not talking about an NGO. I'm talking about the church of God. So I think those are valuable reflection back of that question.
Yeah, and that's important. Sorry, because before I say that, I know it's a role of church leaders, the yourselves and yourself as missionaries, to make sure that God is the center. It's a God-centered community.
Yeah.
And I think that term in Latin, Missio Dei,
agree.
It comes from God. It's God's mission.
God's mission.
And we got to continually remind ourselves that it's God's mission. It's God's promises. It's God's calling.
It's God's story that we're
God's
telling.
Story. It's God's story. That's a good one.
Hey, also, look, I've really enjoyed this, man. I think it's been a really rich talanoa, and I could keep asking you questions forever. I mean, it's quite good. Maybe I'm getting a free theological degree.
Oh no,
on the podcast. But also, I guess for us, Fresh Truth, we always leave the closing words to the guest. So if there's any Bible encouragement or your courses that you're teaching or anything you want to say to those that are listening and watching, I just leave it to you. But I just wanted to say on behalf of the Fresh Truth, I just wanted to say thank you heaps. This is your gift.
Oh, thank you.
Which is our Fresh Truth Cup, and it's got Jude 3, appealing that you contend earnestly for the faith, and it's got the logo there. But this is a small gift for you also. But I'm going to hand it back to you, Laidlaw.
Thank you.
Hand it back to you, bro, for any closing words.
Yeah, yesterday our elder was sharing about the Beatitudes, and it went into so Matthew 5, and I was reading further into Matthew 5:13 to 16, and there is the metaphors used by Jesus, who I think is the master teacher.
Amen.
And so I want to read about these images of salt and light. So Matthew 5:13, you are the salt of the earth, but if salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot. 14, you are the light of the world. A town built on a hill cannot be hidden. So I was really one of those, when you're wrestling with a Bible verse, and this is one of those verses I was wrestling with quite a while back, probably back in Malua. I was thinking, what does it mean by it's no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot? So I did because in biblical hermeneutics or biblical interpretation, there's a saying that a text without a context is a pretext.
Very good.
So
say it again, please, Tim, because that's one of our key sayings.
A text without a context is a pretext.
Amen.
And so I really want to go deeper into the context. And what I found out was there's we'll just say lost in translation. When you translate something into another language, you lose the true meaning of the. So when they translated the Hebrew scripture into the LXX, the Septuagint, back in the Greek Bible, they lost the meaning. So it's basically, if you actually look at that, it should be you are the salt of the earth oven, not the salt of the earth. And the earth oven, we know, in Māori they have the hangi, in Fiji they have the lovo, Samoa and Tonga have the umu. I think the Tongans borrowed it from the Samoans.
Yes, I think they still
But so that's a wonderful image, and the image I have of the earth oven back in Jesus' time, what they had was the young ladies would collect cow dung or camel dung, and what they do is they collect the dung and they'll flatten it like a hamburger patty. No McDonald's today, but and what they did was they would flatten it and then they'll leave it out in the sun to dry. And then once it's dry, they collect all the dung patties. We'll just call it dung patties, and they put salt on it. And they put salt on it. They rub salt on both sides. They turn around, rub salt down, and then they stack it upon each other like a
pyramid.
Kind
of, okay.
And so what they do, so when you wanted to light a fire, that was their earth oven, and you still see it done today if you actually Google, earth oven in ancient East or the Middle East. Yeah. And what happens is when they light a fire. Basically that's the oven, and they put stuff on top to cook their food. The reason why they put salt on the earth oven on the actual patties is kind of like the coconut shell and the husk in the islands. When you use in Samoa, they put the coconut shell there to make it burn faster, and they put the husk over the top to make it burn longer. So the salt serves as a catalyst to make it burn longer and burn faster.
Okay.
Without the salt, it kind of loses all the energy and just fuses out. So it's
a short fire.
It's short fire.
Yeah.
But when you rub the salt onto the salt had a lot of uses back in Jesus' time. It was also you could always rub it on meat we didn't have any freezers.
It was a payment. It was used as a payment.
As a payment.
Yeah.
So the earth oven, when you rub salt on it, it lasts longer and it burns. It's a lot more stronger, a lot more powerful fire. Oven, but when it loses its saltiness, then it starts to fade away. So this is where the context comes into it. So what happened? Can I read it again? You are the salt of the earth oven, but if the salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It is no longer good for anything. So what happens after they've used it as earth oven? They throw the dung patties out into the open for people to walk on. So that's the image. So Jesus' audience would understand that because, I understand what's coming on because that's my culture. So that's where that comes in. What I really like about this one is that they're very intentional in putting together the image of the salt of the earth oven and the light to the world. Because we can't shine our light to the world if we've lost our saltiness.
If it's a short fire,
it's connected.
It's
Connected. So it's connected there. So very, very smart, Jesus and Matthew for putting this together. those images are connected. They're not separate images, but they're two metaphors that are actually connected, and we get a lesson out of that. So you can't shine we are called to shine our light to the world, but we can't shine our light if we don't have the saltiness. So we can have what is the saltiness? It could be a theological answer. God. If you don't have God, if you don't have the Spirit of God in your life, you can't shine your light. So that's just something that I wanted to share, that we are the light to the world, but make sure that we have enough saltiness in them.
You're very good.
It's theological, but salt is not good for our bodies, but it's a theological...
some salt is good for our body, especially on steaks. Yeah.
But it's something I wanted to share.
Yeah.
And Jesus, man, what a smart guy. The master teacher.
Well, on that note, Terry, again, thank you very much for gracing us with your presence today. It's been a real joy, bro. It's been a long time for us catching up, but it's really cool to tala noa over this stuff. Again, to all of those who are listening and watching on Fresh Truth, God bless you guys. Please continue to send your questions or your thoughts or your comments. Any hate mail, please send it to Terry.
Yep.
But any good stuff, send it to us.
Send it to me.
And any terrorist mail, send it to Canaan, because then that's where we really need to make sure he's on point. But on that note, to God alone be the glory. Tō whāsoi fua. We'll see you again. God bless you, fam. Malua.
Taimole au noa.